Welcome to my talk right now with Ann Hammond, the publisher of the website Carlist.com. Great to have you here.
Thanks, John.
Let's talk about what's going on in Brazil. You just got back from there. They're going gangbusters in oil exploration and with ethanol. What are some of the latest things that you learned?
You know, John, it's amazing what you learn about your own country when you go to somebody else's country. So, for example, I learned that in the United States, we are almost completely saturated with cars. So for one person, they have about 1.2 car. In Brazil, for 8 people, they have 1 car. So a lot of potential in Brazil, pretty saturated in the United States. For gasoline, and in Brazil, gasoline is always mixed with 20 to 25% alcohol, or ethanol as we call it. And down there, it's about $6.89 a gallon. Alcohol itself, or E100, ethanol 100, is about $3.80 a gallon. Of course, here, gasoline is about $3 a gallon. For Brazil's exports, they are a net exporter. They're actually exporting ethanol now and not importing any oil, so that they have a net trade of 0 on their trade deficit. We, of course, our oil cost us about 40% of our trade deficit. Huge difference there.
And they just found a bunch of oil there, right? That doubled their reserves?
It did. They used to have about 11 billion in reserves, 11 billion barrels of oil in reserves. Right off the coast of Rio de Janeiro, they found about 8 billion barrels of reserve of oil. So they're very happy about it. It's going to be deep. It's going to be about 4 times the cost of drilling that regular just Saudi Arabia oil will be. So you get about, I think it's $17 to $20 a barrel for Saudi Arabia oil. It's going to be about $72 to $80 a barrel to get this out of the salt and sea rock of Rio de Janeiro. But Petrobras says they will do it, and they'll do it in about 3 to 4 years, which is way different from what Venezuela is doing, because Venezuela is not putting money into the production of oil. So here the United States we're actually buying oil from Venezuela with no tariff, and we won't buy ethanol from Brazil without a tariff of 54 cents a gallon. When I went down there, I went down and said, okay, does this give you some leverage now? You know, now that you've found oil, because we need all the oil we can get. We need gasoline. We're 96% dependent on gasoline for our vehicles. Will this help? And they said, what about if instead we refine this oil in Brazil, mix it 10% with ethanol, and ship it to Asia, sell it to them? Well, that helps their Kyoto protocol, doesn't it?
Sure, because it takes 10% of the carbon right out of the fuel.
Right. And you go, okay, why Asia? So I have to do a little bit more digging, because here I am thinking, you know, we've got a pretty decent agreement with Brazil on most things except for energy. And so I go to a couple other economists and say, what's going on? Why Asia? And they said, well, Asia, in particular Japan, Mitsui, is investing in ethanol production in Brazil. And Brazilians like it when people invest in their country. Poverty and crime still real rampant in Brazil. They need to develop as quickly as they can. They need to get some of these people out of the corrugated steel homes they live in, the favelas. So they really need all that development that they can. And if there are other countries willing to come in and help, then they're going to do it. America is having United States, excuse me, not America. United States is having problems right now with their subprime and stuff. So they're seeing Brazil's seeing less IPOs from the United States market. So Japan is stepping in with the ethanol production and going to make a difference.
So where do you think this is all going for Brazil? It's going to become a net energy exporter, or I guess already is, but using this newfound oil and mix ethanol in with that and use that to help get its ethanol into world markets.
I do think that's where it's going to go. I think that seeing that as a timeline of what could happen. Imagine if we, instead of trucking ethanol from Iowa down to Miami if we could just put a pipeline from Brazil and actually buy 10% ethanol with gasoline. Brazil is also talking about taking the technology over to Mexico, and this was confirmed by a couple of journalist friends from Mexico, that they are looking at Brazil for the technology of learning how to create ethanol in their own country as well. So Brazil is looking very wide globally at ethanol and at how to help people, teach them how to create ethanol in a blend with gasoline. I should also say that Brazil's sales of flex fuel vehicles have gone from about almost zero just 5 or 6 years ago to 80% of the market now has flex fuel vehicles that they're buying.
Very interesting. Watching this ethanol market develop in other places of the world. There's so much focus on it in the U.S., but we tend to ignore the fact that there's a lot of activity going on elsewhere. Luann, thanks so much for coming in and bringing us up to date on your latest trip to Brazil and everything you found out about what they're doing down there.
Thank you, John.